online for authors. I'm chatting with Shelby Saville. She is the author of And They Had a Great Fall. Welcome, Shelby.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I am super excited to have you. Loved the book. Before we really jump into it, though, can you give maybe like a elevator pitch or a quick feel for what a reader's going to get when they open up the cover?
Sure. This is a contemporary romance, a little angsty novel about a young up-and-coming celebrity and a single mom who's been widowed that are both stuck in their lives. And it's really about them meeting up in a foreign city and working through being unstuck in their lives, if that's a good way to think about it.
Yeah.
So lots of angst and chemistry and drama, but overall an uplifting read in the end.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So is this your debut novel?
It is, yes.
That's what I thought, because I looked, I couldn't find another one, but then I thought, well, I don't know. So what made you decide contemporary romance as a debut novel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was, I got interested in the idea of the story, which is really around two people that are stuck, trying to be unstuck. And I like contemporary romance as a reader, little more than other romance genres. And I wanted to write something that felt very realistic. And I wasn't seeing a lot of contemporary romance that was really showed a very sensitive man and a very strong woman, kind of flipping the genre a little bit, and had a real sense of realism. There's a lot of escapism, which I do love as a reader, actually. But I also wanted to try my hand at something that felt very realistic and very akin to the times now.
Yeah, yeah. So what I loved was like Jake and Kat, they're very different. They are very different in the way they view life. They're very different in how they can live. They're just very different. But they met during the pandemic, which was like a very different time.
Yes.
And during that very different time, they connected. They found this chemistry and things were able to be okay. But then the pandemic eventually goes away. They go on with their lives, right? A year later, they meet up. Boom. Now they have to figure out, like, what does this mean for them? Where did that idea come from? I loved that whole thing about everything was so different. And now they've got to figure out how to make it work if they're going to make it work, right?
Yes. And it really started from, again, I wanted a sense of realism. And I was thinking, how would a young celebrity and a single mom actually realistically meet up and be able to like explore a relationship? And these were two people that are very stuck in their lives. He is starting to get famous and it might not be exactly what he wanted. So he's kind of hesitating for the next part of his life. She, had tragedy in her life and she's stuck in that place of, I am having a life I didn't think I would have. And I really wanted the life I thought I would have. So I'm kind of stuck.
Right.
So I put them in the pandemic when the whole world was stuck. Because that was the point where it made sense that those two could actually connect and have something that was, even if they didn't realize it and they thought it was surface, was pretty authentic. But it would actually be really powerful to explore what would happen when the world is unstuck, but they are still stuck.
But they still have all of their issues and haven't gone through them at all. Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
Well, as a newly widowed woman, my husband passed away in January. I'm reading this story and it's like, I'm connecting so much with her and her stuckness, right? And even though she and I are very different because I'm older, she was young with a child. I have 4 grown children. I don't work in the business world the way she does, but I understood some of her feelings. And then with him, there were so many times I wanted to shake him. I just wanted to, it was like, you're a great guy and what are you doing? And then other times where I wanted to shake her and say, oh my gosh, you're going to throw away something good because of some idea you have in your head that doesn't even match reality anymore. So I'm curious, who did you like writing better, Kat or Jake?
That's such a good question because it changed throughout the novel, to be honest. I wrote Jake's arc first. I am a little bit more of a Jake, where I'm a little more like all over the place, creative. I work in advertising. My husband's a little bit more like Kat. He's very buttoned up. And so I really enjoyed writing his character. And it was very important to me that he be young. So that's where some of you want to shake him because he's a little naive.
Right.
But he's also like well put together. He's not young and bratty and a celebrity. He's like a good person. He just
good person. But sometimes you're like, what are you thinking? Right.
Yeah, exactly. He just has kind of a little bubble of in his idea of life. And then and her story arc, frankly, was not as fleshed out as it needed to be. And I then started really focusing on her. And I work in the corporate world, so people think I'm more like a cat. But I could really tap into that idea of, as a mom, you just want to do everything right, especially your first time. And you just have this idea of, if I do everything right, nothing bad is going to happen, and therefore I have to follow these rules. And I really tapped into she's 15 now, but when I first had my daughter, and felt like I just needed to get everything right on every milestone and everything, and really tapped into that and realized I could follow her arc of realizing that there's a lot to life and you can't contain everything in this little bucket.
Right. And then, of course, she had a little more of that angst about wanting to do everything right because her husband died. And so she feels like, first of all, now the responsibility is completely hers. It's not even shared anymore. And second of all, she can't think of having another tragedy in her life. Like she can't believe, so she's got to do everything in her power to keep that from happening.
Yeah, I think there's a line where she says, if I do everything right, nothing else bad will happen. And that's not how life works, but I can see, and I myself, there are moments in my life where I compartmentalize to think I can somehow control things more than I can.
Absolutely. And so I loved that about her. So you ended up loving both of your characters.
I did. I loved them so much. I wrote the conflict last because I didn't want anything to happen. I really just liked writing them. And I wrote a lot about them. And there were points where I had to start culling it down to get a real story flow. But I was like, forever to write the actual conflict because of the fact that I just loved them so much. I wanted to hang out with them.
Yeah. So when it came to the conflict, did you already know before you got started what that conflict was going to be? Or did that just kind of happen with the writing?
I had a good idea of what it would be and what would be the thing that would come between them. It did evolve, though, like what exactly it was and how it came about and the point at which their bubble bursts, really.
Right.
That changed. But I always knew it was about two people that were in a bubble and then really wanted to stay in that bubble together. And then that bubble.
And it doesn't work that way. Yeah,
exactly. So I kind of knew, but I definitely let it change and flow as the story went on. And I realized what would be a more authentic lead up to that. And then a lead out from that did change.
Right. So I'm curious then, do you consider yourself a pantser or a plotter or somewhere in the middle?
I would say I'm more of a plotter. Like I would think I'm generally live more like a pantser, but it's easier for me if I outline what I think it's going to be. And then I do allow it to evolve a bit. Right. But I try to stay in some construct because if not, I will go all over the place. I mean, I have reams and reams of scenes that I wrote just for fun after I had done the novel because I was like, I want to see what would happen if they did this together. But so I have to have a flow or I'll go everywhere.
So, what's interesting about what you said is that you live like a pantser and you write like a plotter. And I am just opposite.
Really?
I live like a plotter. I have lists and lists all through my house that I mark off methodically every day. And I have these things and I do them and I just keep and then when I write, I cannot write that way. I try to make this outline and my brain just goes, no, I'm not doing that with you. I'm just, we're not doing that. And so it's kind of crazy to me. And I think it's interesting that you're just the opposite. I almost wonder if as a writer, you almost need to be someone else.
Yes.
Writing,
that makes sense. Like, especially because you're using an interesting part of your brain that it doesn't work how maybe the other parts do. And that's how you tap into your own creativity.
Yeah. That's interesting. I've never heard someone say that before, that they live that, because I've always felt that way. That, I live like this, perfect plotter. I've got my schedule for the week out already typed up on the counter so that I can cross things off as I go. And if I wrote like that, I've tried writing like that and it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. Right. And you do the same thing. And you say it just kind of like goes everywhere and you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So I need something to constrain me.
Right. I get that. That's great. Do you have a particular format of plotting that you use? Like, have you read a certain book or you follow a certain program, or do you just kind of in your mind write down where that story's going?
I just usually write an outline of what I think the story is
Okay.
going to be. And it's much more the core of the story, the characters, the scenes I want to have versus I don't do inciting action and
Yes.
then this, and I don't do it in a writer format. I do it. These are two characters. The first scene is going to be something like this. And so it is a little bit where I'm probably doing a little pantsing in there, but I
Right.
will do so that I know the things I want to lead up, and then I know what the arcs and the flows
Right.
are in an outline format, but I don't necessarily do it in typical writing
Right.
lingo. That's partially because I've spent most of my career in business. So I've done a lot of outlines for presentations and other story flows. So it actually reads like I'm about to do a presentation, but that it's like
But
an actual novel.
I think what's wonderful though is the more authors I talk to, the more I realize that there isn't one way or a right way
Yeah.
to get this to happen. What it is how do you get it to happen? What works best for you? And you've learned that you do it more like a presentation. Other people, I have a friend who has like beats, and she knows what every beat's going to be, and she has them on little note cards, and she has it all laid out. Then there's me, who's a complete mess, and I usually have a character idea and maybe one scene. And it's like, okay, that's where I'll start. And then I just start writing.
Yep.
And there's all the books out there, that you can buy that tell you, well, there's this way, and there's this way, and there's this way, and there's this way. And I think it's just wonderful to meet authors and find out how many different writing styles there are,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
that we all end up with good books.
Yeah, it's like
So
you
yeah,
just need to do it in the way that works for you. And I always worry when someone feels like someone's telling them they have to do it a certain way, because it's like you do it in the way that creativity flows out of your body and it will work for you.
absolutely.
But if that doesn't work for someone else, that's just a different way that their brain brings that creative idea to life.
I agree completely. Let's see, what other good questions do I have for you today? Oh, I was interested in the fact that you have it in New York City is kind of where we start during the pandemic. I'm assuming it was New York City. It said New York. I figured it
Yeah,
was New York
yeah,
City, right?
yeah.
Okay. And then bam, we're in Copenhagen. So I'm curious, why Copenhagen? Like, have you been there? Is it really a romantic city? Is it, I don't know, where did that come from?
Yeah, so I have been to Copenhagen. I love it. It's one of my favorite cities.
Okay.
There was a very functional reason, which was I wanted them to go from one bubble to another. And so when they met up, I wanted it to be in a small, lesser known foreign city so that it wouldn't be in New York or Paris or something where like a celebrity like him could
Would
not
be
walk
so well
around.
known. Right.
It would be
Right.
so well known. So I wanted that to be functional. But really, it's the fact that Kat and Jake are so different. And as we talked about, like she's very buttoned up and practical. He's very creative. And if you think about Danish design is very much form and function. And so I felt like Copenhagen as a city and being in Denmark really fit that in that it's the type of city where you will walk down the street and there'll be an art installation that you can also climb on because it has a function to it as well as being beautiful. And so what I liked was setting a city that I felt like mirrored the main characters of you can have these two things happening and something can still be very beautiful and work really well. But then it also served to just be a tiny little place for them to bubble up for a little while.
For a little while, right? I loved that. And I enjoyed, not having been to Copenhagen before, I enjoyed you did really good description. I feel like now I have been there, or that if I went, I would know where I wanted to go visit and things that I wanted to see. Beyond a great story, which it is, and I really loved, is there something else you're hoping readers are going to get from this story?
I think it's just realizing that, we're all flawed in our own ways. And you can work through your issues with someone, without someone. And I think it's just realizing that everyone thinks everyone else is doing it right. And whether someone is achieving the greatest thing they always wanted, or they've had something terrible happen in their lives, like we're all just trying to figure it out. That was really the core of how I felt when I finished the story. It was really a story of people just trying to figure out how to have an authentic life.
Absolutely, because as I'm reading them, and I want them so badly to have an authentic life, and I can see them mucking it up, and it is true that you have to figure yourself out.
Yeah.
And Yeah, you got to figure yourself out. And once you get yourself figured out, then you can start making these determinations of, can I do something with someone else? Is it something that we can make work? I
Yeah.
also loved the idea that even though they were so different and came from such very different lives, that there is always a way, if you want it to happen, to find a way to mesh two different worlds.
Yeah. And there's always a way to pivot your own life in the direction you want versus life coming at you, because they were two people who felt that life had gotten away from them and life was coming at them versus them deciding what they wanted their life to be. And so that also was a thing that I hope people take from it.
Yeah, I like that.
And an interesting thing an early reader said to me, which I also liked, was buried in there. It's also very much an ode to mothers, because she is a mom just with a young child, just trying to get everything right. Jake's mom plays a role, and she's trying to mother a child who has left the nest and is very successful and still figure out what is their role in life. And then her late husband's mother has a role where she is just trying to be a mom to anyone at that point.
Yes.
She's lost the son. And so it is, I don't think I realized that when I wrote it, but afterwards I've had a couple of people say like, oh, you had such an interesting look at the journey of motherhood and different moms and how they show up for people. And I was like, oh, that's so profound. I don't know that I meant to do that, but it did.
Isn't that wonderful as an author when someone points something out and you're like, wow, I did that.
Yes, I know. I loved it. I was like, I hadn't thought about that, but it is. And I do feel that way. I feel like the strength of women and mothers is very strong. And so that's inherent in that. But I didn't actually really put that together. And it was so lovely to hear that was coming out of it for when people were reading it.
Absolutely. I do love that. So have you had the opportunity to do like book clubs or those kinds of things with people yet?
I haven't done book clubs yet, so I'm planning on doing a few. I've done one or two events, but I'm excited to do some book clubs.
What's wonderful about book clubs is the kind of thing that you just said, where someone will say, oh, let me read this thing that really touched me. Well, first they're reading it and you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're talking, that's my words. They're reading my words. And then second of all, they think that, wow, I touched someone. Like this is what they got from the story. So yeah, I highly recommend that you find a book club, sit yourself down and just let them talk, because you'll walk away thinking, well, that you're the best writer since, peanut butter. And, here we are, right?
Love it. Yes.
So tell me a little bit about your writing journey. So when did you decide, hey, I'm going to actually write? And then what do you do to get a book out? Is it a daily thing? Is it like, what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So I have always loved to write. I went to college with English and journalism because I wanted to be a writer. I worked for a newspaper for a little while. And then I fell into the job I've had for 26 years, which is on the media investment side. So very different than writing, very financial, very much about the money of advertising. And have loved it. But I've always had this thing in my brain that I've got this other side that's not the finances of anything. And it was in 2021. I read this article about a young celebrity and that his life was about to change. And the writer had said the second part of his life will be nothing like the first part of his life. And the idea of life changes was in my head. And the idea came to me and I said to my husband, I have a book in me and it's about to come out. And so I need like a laptop that's not work. And I just started writing, and frankly, in 20-minute increments, because I have a very busy day job. And so it was part of, I always wrote little things here and there, a poem here, article or Substack here, a business article, that kind of thing. And then as I started writing, I just found that opening up that side of my brain that I had closed for 26 years was so freeing and wonderful. And I also had a daughter who was watching me and enjoying me reading sections to her talking to me about what are we going to do with the characters, that kind of thing. So it became a little bit of a project with her and I. And then next thing I knew, I had this outline filled out that I had actually written all the scenes that I thought and the characters that I thought, but I didn't know what to do next. And so I actually just Googled, like, what are the processes of bringing a book to life. And so then I hired a developmental editor who took a look at it and went, wow, there's a lot of things here that are not good. Like, and not that she was being unkind, but like to help story structure and flow and genre norms and things like that. And so I just set out on a journey with this editor to just bring the story to something that I felt really proud I'd want people to read. And my idea was not about publishing at first. It was like, I just want to write a novel that reflects the women that I know and the men that I know, because I know a lot of very creative, sensitive men and very strong women. And maybe I'll just like send it to my friends, or, you know, I'll post it somewhere. I don't know. But then I just kept refining it and kept refining it. And then I loved it so much and just wanted to see what would happen. And I also had a teenage daughter saying, now what? Now what? Now what? What do you do now?
Right.
And so then I just started figuring out what's the next step? What's the next step? And I got connected to She Writes Press, who publishes a lot of women authors and also does a decent amount of debuts, and started working with them and thought, okay, I'm really going to do this and put this out here and start to think about what is the second half of my life and what do I want to do? And I love to write. So can I make that a thing that I do? And do I have the ability to take these ideas and actually get them out on paper?
So you say you write in like 20-minute increments.
Yes.
I have no idea how you do that.
Oh my gosh. That's part of why I have to have the outline, because I have to know, like, I'm going to go on section 3 right now and write this little scene, because I have to do it on my commute home. And then once my laptop closes, I have to go to water polo and I have to get this done and I have to go over here.
Right.
Or an airplane or a hotel room late at night when I'm done working. Like, people say, how did you find the time? And I'm like, in little 20-minute bits. But because I had the outline, I could go in and be like, fill in. I was basically filling in pieces of the story throughout. And that's why I knew I had to hire someone to help me with the flow, because I was like, I wrote this in chunks and I've kind of made it flow, but I really need someone to give me some direction and some real strong, like, real feedback on what's working and not working.
So what's crazy is you and I are like complete opposites then on that as well, because I love to go away on a 2-week retreat where I have nothing else to do. No one is going to talk to me. No one expects me to do anything. I don't even have to worry if my hair's combed. Like, I'm just doing me. And in that 2 weeks, I will get the first draft out.
Love it. I would love to do that. I would love to. If I had the ability, that's what I would like to do, because I think I work really well on a deadline. So if I was like, I have these 2 weeks, and in these 2 weeks, I'm going to get all of these things done.
And I call it word vomit. I just let it out. And I don't do any wordsmithing. I don't worry about the fact that I'm using weak words and that all my sentences start with she. I just don't worry about those things. I get the bulk of the story out. Then I just let it perk for a while, and then I pick it up and read it and start making notes about, if that doesn't work and I need to add this somewhere, and all of that. Then I go back and start doing my editing, but I love to get it out in one big chunk.
I love that. I think I'm going to do that at some point, because I think it's better for the story a lot of times, because it was hard sometimes to be like, oh God, hold on, I got to connect these two things, because when I wrote this, I had two different ideas.
Two different ideas going on, right?
And I've got to really work through that. So people always say, how long did it take you to write it? I said, it didn't take me that long to get the work and like the draft out, probably like 4 to 6 weeks. It took me a year of editing, like a year of noodling with it and playing around with it and changing. I changed where it started, all of that, because it's really hard when you're doing it in chunks, in pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, you said that your editor was like, oh, there's a lot of things we can work with here. Was there anything in particular that really stuck out to you? That is like, when you write your next book, you'll use that as a guide to keep you more on track?
I think that the thing that stuck out to me is she did such a good job helping me define not just the story and the actions of the story, like this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen, the emotional arc of what it was I was trying to say. Like, she hooked on to this fact that I said that this is a story about people who had a life before and the life after, and they're stuck in the middle of that. And that was something where she was like, okay, that is your emotional arc, and you've got to go really hard at that. Versus I was a little like, and then this is going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and then this action's going to happen. And I think that was the thing, that it was okay to start, because I am a plotter, it's okay to start with an emotional place and a character place, and let those things happen a little, let them breathe a little bit,
Right.
which is what I needed to do. And it might still be my process. I get all the actions down and then I've got to let it breathe and get the emotions in there. But that was fascinating. And I think, as I've started different sets of stories, I'm trying to spend a little more time like breathing with the characters and the emotions versus worrying about getting to the action too fast, because I can always cut things out of it.
Right. Right. So you've alluded to it. Why don't you tell us what's next? What are you working on now?
So I have two things. Well, I have a lot of little things, but I have two bigger things. Yeah. So one is a couple of people have asked if I would do a prequel because so much happens in the novel before it happens. And I do love these characters and I would love to see her in her first marriage. And so I played around with an outline around what would that be like, that story. And then I'm actually trying my hand at something that's a little lighter because this one's kind of inksier. That is a little bit more of a lighter, more rom-com-y about, I love a second chance love story. I mean, I just love that about two people that were boy-girl friends in high school, drifted apart, and then meet up again, because I love the meet up again point.
Right.
So I'm playing around with that, kind of a little more of a like road trippy rom-com kind of thing.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I love hearing that. So, hey guys, if you want to keep this conversation going, head on over to Novels and Latte Book Club on Facebook. And there you're going to have the chance to win a digital copy of And They Had a Great Fall. So just find the little message there. Tell us what you liked or loved about this podcast, and you'll have a chance to win. So, Shelby, if someone wanted to get up with you, talk with you about your novel, invite you to be on their book club, whatever, how do they get in touch with you?
Absolutely. I have an Instagram, Shelby Saville author, which I know you're going to post in your notes, Facebook, all the socials. I'm very active, very comfortable with that. So if anyone wants to drop me a line, I'm available there.
Fantastic. And like you said, they will be in the show notes. And Shelby, I want to thank you so much for being with me today. This has been a wonderful chat, and I really enjoyed your book.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Online for Authors, where I, Terry M. Brown, author of character-driven fiction and host of the podcast, introduce readers to characters they'd love to invite to lunch. Tune in next Tuesday for another podcast episode.